Hello. In this video, we are going to add a health system for the player. So Kaboom does have a health system kind of built into it, but for the purpose of intro to computer programming, I think I'd like to just use variables and if statements and all that kind of stuff. Um, so we're going to find a good place then to have a variable for the health player. I could add it as a property, but I could also just have a variable up here. So maybe I'll even make it before the level is created. So I'm going to say let HP equal 3. And I chose the let keyword as opposed to const because const doesn't let you change that. So let, it can decrease then. All right, so now that that variable exists, I'm going to figure out why would the variable change? So it's when the player collides with the ogre. So we already have that set up actually. So player on collide with enemy. So we already have this function here. We're just going to modify it. So whenever this happens, then we don't want to just immediately destroy the player. I think we want to just have it lose some health. So I'm actually going to delete this line because I don't think we want that anymore. So keep the kaboom, but the waiting and going to the lose, I want that to hold off for a little bit. So maybe let's go ahead and just throw that in an if statement. If, now why should the player go to the lose scene if HP is equal to 0? And then open up some curly braces. And then take the wait 1 second and then go to the lose scene. That's going to be inside those curly braces. Just going to press tab to clean this up a little bit. All right, so now you can see with the edges of those curly braces, if the HP is 0, that's what should happen. So now it shouldn't be the case anymore that the player goes to the lose scene. All right, so at least we've kind of prevented that. But eventually we do want the player to get down to 0. So I'm going to do that. So player on colliding with enemy, add a kaboom, and then HP minus minus. So that will decrease the HP of the player so that eventually it can get to 0. That might do it too. All right, so eventually I get a you lose scenario. All right, one thing I'm going to do is I was just curious if the multiple ogres would work. So I'm just going to take one of those out. I don't have a very large level here. I'm just making sure that everything is working the way I want it to. Yep, all right. And then that goes to you lose scene. We click retry, and then it'd be a little hard to test, but the HP is set back to 0, or set back to 3 rather. So that's what we're hoping for. So I think instead of setting it to 3, I will make it 2, because when it is 0, then that's when you go to the lose scene. So this is going to set it up where I have 3 hits, because I go down to 1, and then down to 0. Then it happens on that the next collision there. The other thing I'd like to do is actually display the HP. So I'll make a new label for that. So I am going to use the add function again. I'm not going to put it inside the level. That's just not really going to work with what we're trying to do. So I'm just going to add an array of components, a text element that says HP colon space, lowercase, plus HP. It'll say 2 the first time, but at least it'll be flexible, comma, come up with a position. So, well, maybe I could say something like 1616. Let's just see what that looks like. All right, so I get this property here, or I get it looking this way, because the scale versus of the text versus the scale of the game is all a little bit mixed up. So that's where I'm going to want to adjust the size of everything. I'm going to check out the text component to see if there are some settings I can put on there. I could give it a size as opposed to a font or a different kind of font, and I could set the width and all that kind of stuff. So maybe I'll try setting the size here, the size property. All right, so in the text component here, that's the string that I want to see, comma, some JSON data. Lets me set the size property. What if I did set it to 16? Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's a little more in line with the scale of our game. It just happens that every one of those cells is 16 pixels big. So that's more or less the scale we want to go with. Okay. Now while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and add the fixed component to this label here. It doesn't change anything right away, but eventually what it's going to do, pull up the fixed component here. What it do? It makes it unaffected by the camera. So eventually, once we add in the camera, then that HP is just going to lay right there. It's not going to move outside of everything else. All right, so that'll just have that in there for us. All right, so we have the HP system. We can see the HP now. All right, so now we just need to make sure to update that there. So somehow we have to like get an object or rename it. So this would be good to actually make a variable, just like we did const player equals add. We should say const, maybe like HP label equals add. So HP label is a variable that we can use. So when the player does collide with the ogre or with an enemy, so player on collide with an enemy, reduce the HP, but update that label. So take HP label dot text, set that property equal to quotes HP colon space and HP. So we'll say the letters HP colon space, and then we'll also say whatever HP actually is. Updated that text property. So the reason why it looks like that is because of that delay right there. So maybe it would be good to actually add in the destroy player. So if HP is equal to 0, go ahead and destroy player, but then start the timer to go lose. Let's see what that looks like. 1, 2, so player's destroyed, a little bit of time, yep. Okay, so have that health system in play here.